social media. Oh, thank you. I'm going to start over again for the recording. Welcome, everybody. There's a ton of information out there on social media and the interwebs about what women over 50 should be doing, like heavy lifting. They're supposed to be doing sprint intervals, plyometrics. And then there's also experts out there who are on the other side saying that you don't need to be doing those things at all. And so tonight, Matt and I are going to cut through the noise about plyometrics. We'll be debunking some myths, break down exactly what plyometrics are, and explain the real benefits, and show you a scalable, logical way to safely add them into your workouts. No guesswork required. And this is what Matt and I will be covering tonight during this hour. First, we're going to start off with what are plyometrics? And spoiler alert, they're not box jumps. Now, we're going to also talk about common barriers for women that come up in training and how you get past them, how plyometrics and bone health. This one most people hear a lot about on social media. Benefits beyond bones, everyday applications, how plyometrics affects our life, and then Matt's scalable logical system to integrate plyometrics into your exercise. And if we've got enough time, we're going to do a Q&A at the end. And if you have questions during the presentation, please do put it into the chat. Our moderator, Isabella, will be collecting them and she'll post some common ones at the end so that we can answer. And let's start with introductions. Sorry, guys, I went too far. I'm Coach Tina Tang, and I'm a certified personal trainer for about 13 years. And I primarily train older women because I understand what we're going through physically, emotionally, mentally at this time, especially around lifting weights and doing plyometrics and the apprehensions around it. And I wanted to share that in 2023, I only then started adding plyometrics and agility work into my own training. And honestly, it was sparked by a boxing class that I took where we were told to jump rope. Now, a quarter of the class was jump roping effortlessly while I kept tripping over the rope. And even though I'd been lifting heavy for over a decade, I was strong. I was definitely not agile or nimble. So at 52, I decided that this is something I needed in my life. And in adding this into my life, I can feel and see the difference. I move faster with more assurance. And I even had a colleague of the same age say to me, "You move like a gazelle." Thank you. And because of plyometrics and agility work, I'm much more coordinated, sure on my feet, and I feel, this is my favorite word, springy. And that's exactly why I want to share all this information with you tonight. And let me hand it over to my co-host, Coach Matt, to share an introduction of himself.
Thank you, Tina. I want to say as well that I'm glad that Tina took it upon herself to get into plyometrics because it definitely brought us together. And the amount that I have learned from her, having her problems, her coming to me and saying, I've got these clients and we're trying to solve these issues. And as someone that comes from the performance sector, working with international athletes and then having to run my system all the way back to someone that just wants to feel good, move well, and improve movement longevity. It continues, like looking in the Gen Pop realm continues to push what I want to know more about with regards to plyometrics and how I can systematize it better for everyone. So I was an international high jumper. That's what led me down the road of plyometrics. And I met a guy the first time I ever high jumped called Eric Little, and he comes from a system of where plyometrics originated from, and that was from Russia and the Eastern Bloc. And he did work in the 70s with one of the best track and field coaches on the planet at the time. And I have kind of taken that baton from my coach and now mentor Eric of 16, 17 years now. And he, as a 77-year-old, I still call him an athlete. He is still an athlete. He sees himself as an athlete, is able to do dynamic movement and to move like a youngster to drink from the fountain of youth that is plyometrics. And I think that it is my goal now as someone that is a retired athlete. I definitely don't compete in my sport like I used to, but it's now my job to really push this into everyone's training and workout. So yeah, I continue to want to deep dive into the education of it when it comes to things like bone health in older populations of women. And it's something that I'm really passionate about. So thank you very much for you guys listening in today. Yeah, and thank you to Tina for letting me jump on. So yeah, let's get into the good stuff, Tina. They don't need to listen to me talk about myself any longer. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
You guys will be hearing his system as soon as I'm done jibber jabbering. Let's go into exactly oh, what are plyometrics? Oh, I went too far. Sorry, guys. Why is that? Oh, there we go. Okay, I went too far. So, to someone who's just scrolling Instagram, plyometrics definitely just looks like you're jumping. But technically, it's a very specific kind of jumping where your intention is to be super quick off the ground. And that technically means a quarter of a second or less. And it's that lightning fast ground contact that makes it plyometric. So it's not just like a jump squat that you might do in a group fitness class where you're kind of sinking down and you pop back up. A true plyometric exercise is composed of landings and takeoffs. And with ground contact times, as I said, of a quarter of a second or less. And that is really fast. So plyometric exercises, when you're doing them, I always like to tell my students, you're really focusing on two outcomes when you're doing a plyometric exercise. You're thinking about your reactivity, which means how fast are you off the ground, and your output, which means how far or how high are you going. So box jumps and squat jumps, they're not plyometrics. They're called, it's abbreviated, they're CMJ, counter movement jumps. And it's because they have longer ground contact time. And for something like a box jump, you don't have landings and takeoffs. And then now let's dive in a little deeper to what makes something plyometric. Okay, come on. Let me see if I can move to this slide. Sorry, guys. Oh, why is that not moving? Can you guys, oh, hold on a second. What are you guys seeing on your screen? I think
It's just
my
freezing at
screen
the moment, Tina.
is
If you need me to pull up anything, let me know.
yeah, I don't know why it's my cam. Do you want to see if you can pull up your Canva? My Canva just
Yeah,
like crashed.
give me two
Okay.
seconds.
Okay.
Okay,
It's
yeah,
probably because I got too many things going.
you're good. Okay. Right, can you okay, I'm gonna replace the
Oh,
current share. There we
oh,
go.
let me
It's all good.
okay.
Can you see?
Uh, yes, let me take off. Let me see if I can close my screen. Oh, I don't know why. Oh, here, let me close mine. Okay, you guys can see. Oh, can you move on to the next slide? Perfect. All right. So this is into the weeds of a plyometric. So let's start on the left side where you see that it says setup. That's the start of where you can say like the starting cycle of a plyometric. It's also known as the initial momentum. That's like whatever gets you moving into it, a jump, you're running into it, or you're dropping off a box. And then from there in a plyometric, it goes to the next stage, which is called anticipation, or known as pre-activation. That's the more technical term. Anticipation is basically your brain and getting ready. Your body's bracing before your feet even touch the ground and you're getting ready to spring. It's similar to like if you saw someone about to punch you, you know how before they even touch you, you're already like bracing. That is the pre-activation. Then you have first touch, which is the electromechanical delay. That's also what it's known, but we just call it first touch here. That's that split second when your foot hits the floor and then your Achilles tendon loads like a spring, storing elastic energy, and this is what makes your muscles and tendons ready to explode off the ground. From there, it moves into what's called transition or amortization, the tiny pause between landing and pushing off. And the shorter that time is, the more plyometric the movement is. And the energy stored in your tendons is released here. That's what powers your takeoff. And then you can see where I have takeoff, but which is also known as the rebound. And that's that explosive push that sends you back into the air. And then that final momentum, or I wrote down airborne, so you have a visualization. It's flying through the air and setting up for your next landing or movement. So then it goes back into this cycle of 6 phases. So what makes plyometrics different than regular jumping? It is all about that lightning fast transition from your landing to your takeoff. And you're training your body to be springy, reactive, and quick. So as you can see from this, this is not like what a jump squat looks like in class. A jump squat's much too slow. It doesn't give your tendons that rapid stretch shortening cycle that plyometrics do. So as you can see from if you are doing this regularly, plyometrics teaches your body and your brain to work together faster and that's how it improves your coordination, your power, and your agility. By loading your tendons in this controlled way, you're helping them stay strong and resilient. And this is how plyometrics is strength training, not just for your muscles, but also for your tendons. Matt, do you mind moving to the next? Thank you. Okay, now this is a very important consideration when wanting to get into plyometrics. These are things that are common barriers for a lot of women our age. So one of the biggest reasons that prevents women from wanting or shying away from jumping is the fear of leakage. And I defined it there. It's called stress urinary incontinence. And there's reason to have a little bit of trepidation because it's a fairly high percentage. So 17 to 20% of women between 40 and 60 report having this SUI at least once a month. But the number is really skewed. I was just going to give you an idea to feel that you're not abnormal. If you've had kids, that number that you see, 17, 20, is really skewed by people who've had kids. So an example is, let's say women between 40 and 50. The ones that have no kids, maybe 10 or 12% of them will report having SUI. Let's say you've that same age group of women, but ones that have had one kid. That number goes to 18% of the women in that age group who've had one kid will report SUI. And if it goes 2 kids, 3 kids, the percentage does increase. So it's a legitimate apprehension. But what I wanted to express is that it's not a life sentence. So let's talk about what SUI is. So stress urinary incontinence. It's the leakage that happens during high impact activities. Some people might experience when you're laughing, when you're coughing, and then of course, running, jumping. And I wanted to kind of give you a visualization of why this happens. So you can think of the inside of your torso, like behind your rib cage. It's like a bag of water that's it's got water and all your organs in there. And what holds that bag up from the bottom is your pelvic floor muscles. And at the top, it's supported by your diaphragm. So stress urinary incontinence is what happens when your body is not able to manage that internal abdominal pressure. And for example, let's say your posture is off and your pelvis tilts forward and you kind of have a little arch in your back and your butt sticks out. This is a common posture people have. That shifts how that bag of water is inside, making leakage more likely to happen, especially if you've got coughing, laughing, running, jumping, that kind of thing. But what I wanted to emphasize is that SUI can be improved, and you will want to improve it because, as we know, when we get older, nothing just goes away by itself. And the methods that are used in improving SUI is learning how to adjust your posture so that you're stacking your torso. That means like rib cage above your pelvis. Because you might think you do that, but I mean, I even catch myself sometimes tilting my pelvis forward. Breathing techniques, what they call diaphragmatic breathing, which also affects the pressure of your body, that bag of water gut organs on the pelvic floor, and also working on pelvic floor strength, which most pelvic floor therapists will tell you it is not Kegels. And your pelvic floor, which is shaped like a bowl, is like any other muscle in your body. It's like your biceps, that it can be trained through progressive overload. And I often hear women in class say, "Oh, I don't run or jump anymore because I leak." And I wanted to emphasize avoidance is not going to make any of that situation better with age. It can be addressed and it's not a life sentence. So with the right strategies, you can improve your internal pressure control even while you're doing plyometrics, and plyometrics can be done safely with proper pelvic floor engagement. And then we'll move over to the second apprehension that people often think when they get older is like, oh, this is really bad for my knees and ankles, especially when you get older. But the truth is that when introduced progressively and with proper technique, plyometrics actually strengthens our joints. Plyometric exercise, as you saw from the video, it loads the muscles, the tendons, ligaments around the knees, the ankles, your hips, and that improves our stability and our strength. And something that I think a lot of non-fitness professionals might not know, and Matt and I know just because we know a lot of physical therapists, but in physical therapy, they actually incorporate low to moderate level plyometrics into rehab programs for people recovering from knee, ankle, and hip injuries, because the goal is to safely improve everyday movement, your balance, your power. And effective physical therapy means that people can return to dynamic movement like pickleball, tennis, running, jumping. So that's what a good physical therapist does incorporate into rehab. So of course it's important that the plyometric has to be progressive. You start with low impact variations. You're gradually increasing your intensity. And of course, improper or high volume of activity is going to increase injury risk. All of this to say is that we don't get stronger by avoidance, and that progressive plyometrics does improve our knee, ankle, and hip stability and strength. And in regards to the final third thing, things that we've been told, there's a myth that women over 50 shouldn't be doing impact exercises like jumping, hopping, bounding, and that it's bad for our joints. And that's just not true. It can be extremely helpful for us, especially when it comes to bone density, which there's so much research out there showing that it does. As you can see from how quick plyometrics are, it does improve our agility and balance and reaction time, and it strengthens our muscles, tendons, and joints, protecting us from falls and injuries. So that myth about us not being able to do that kind of thing is really wrong. It's holding us women back from exercises that help us be stronger, coordinated, and more springy. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Thank you, Matt. We're going to talk about what I think a lot of you do know about, which is bone density. Oh, thank you, Matt. This you probably have heard as one of the great benefits of plyometrics. And bone health, which I never thought about when I was younger, becomes especially important now, especially with the statistics that basically one out of every two of us is going to experience some sort of osteoporotic fracture. And even though 65 seems so far away, for me, it's only 10 years away, which comes quick, that any women who have some sort of fracture after 65, you only have a 50% chance of being able to do things on your own. So that's kind of an eye-opening statistic. And while strength training is definitely crucial for maintaining bone density, impact really matters for us. And plyometrics provides accessible impact. You don't need a gym and you don't need equipment. And I love this graph because it really shows how much impact is in body weight activities. This is how gravity creates impact for bone density. So let's just look at the one all the way at the end where you see jumping, takeoff, and landing, where you can see that it's 2.5 times body weight and then up to 4. So to give you an idea of what that means, a woman that's 140 pounds with the takeoffs and landings, what she's generating on her bones is 350 to 560 pounds of force on her bones. And I can tell you, I've not lifted that either of those that range of weight before in the gym, and I used to, and I lift pretty heavy. So that's more force than most women can safely lift in the gym, thus giving our bones much more impact exposure than just lifting weights alone. And we'll move on to the next benefit, my favorite benefit, enhancing reaction time. I love being quick on my feet. So, I mean, there's always statistics, but so falls are one of the main reasons that adults over 65 go to the hospital. And we're often told to work on balance training, but staying still and holding tree pose is not what stops us from falling. We all are going to trip, all of us. You see 20-year-olds walking on the sidewalk with their cell phone. We're all texting and walking and driving, and they're going to trip too. But how quickly we react and catch ourselves, that's what separates a 25-year-old from a 65-year-old. So plyometric exercises train our nervous system to respond faster. It gives us that split second to regain our balance before that trip or stumble becomes a serious injury. And then on to the next slide. Thank you, Matt. And the everyday benefits for things that you guys are doing. Pickleball. So this is how plyometrics is helpful. Plyometric training really improves your ability to change direction quickly, to react to an oncoming ball. It makes you more agile and nimble on the court. Walk into a group fitness class. Doing consistent plyometric work really helps you, like my small group class there. It lets you really get into jump rope, tuck jumps, box jumps, all those activities you'll see in a class. It'll make it much easier. So without equipment, you can practice or get your coordination and timing to improve dramatically so that you can walk into all these kind of fun classes without even having to say, oh, I can't do that because XYZ. And then finally, just in your daily life, our overall reactive ability and movement efficiency just carries over to everything that we do. You're more coordinated and you're quicker on your feet. And then the last thing I was going to say before we hand it off to Matt, who's got the controls, is let's talk about how. You're hearing all the benefits. And my co-host, Matt, is going to share the overview of his scalable system that allows everyone a journey into plyometrics. And just so you know, this is the system I follow when I teach my students as well. Take it from here,
Thank,
Matt.
thank you, Tina. That was awesome. I will just give like my kind of 5 cents in terms of where I see plyometrics going for this kick and movement of health longevity. And I heard it really well from someone who's an osteosurgeon, and he was saying in the 80s we had cardio, in the 90s we may have had circuit training, and then it's moved to hypertrophy in the early 2000s. 2010 we moved to barbell training, and kettlebells revitalized. And I think it's very much aligning with what we're understanding with the development of new data on all-cause mortality rates. Cardiovascular health is always going to be really important, but in order for us to do good volumes of running, instead of just sitting there on a bike or staring at the bottom of a swimming pool, can we do things that are going to, what Tina pointed out on, improve our reaction time and understand where we are in space better? And plyometrics is going to be really important with regards to bone health, not just in improving what's happening in the bone, but also reducing the amount of impact that you receive on a hip when you fall on the street. So plyometrics are going to do a lot for us. We need a cardiovascular health, but we really need a very strong muscle that can pull hard on a tendon that can stimulate a bone. And once we hit those three tissues, we have this kind of trifecta of tissue that we all need to affect. And when we just lift weights, we may miss out on the tendon development. We may miss out a little bit on the amount of volume that we can give the bones when we can do hundreds of small landings that could be 2, 3, 4 times body weight. Where if we were to do a 3-rep max on a squat, well, we're not going to get many repetitions of those in comparison. So that's my kind of 5 cents on longevity and plyometrics. I think that it is going to be a new movement in longevity, and I think it's here to stay in terms of what we can tell someone with regards to their lifespan, and ultimately people are going to be a lot more healthier when they can move with a bit of a pop in their step and have that bounce to them. So how do we get there? Safe progression in plyometric training. And so we're going to scale movement through movement patterns and movement amplitude. And this all makes sense as we get into it. There's a lot of information here, but this is looking at scaling movements through different movement patterns. So these 5 terms on the left-hand side. So leaps, split stance leaps, split exchange leaps, bounds, and hops are 5 different ways for us human beings to move in a form of plyometric or within a jumping method. Okay, and primarily we're looking at plyometrics here today. So we have basic stance on 2 feet, as you would do is if you're stood there on 2 feet. You're moving up and down, or you're moving forward or sideways or backwards. A split stance leap. There's a small split in those feet, and that is a fixed limb stance. Split exchange leap. So I phrase them leaps. Everything on 2 feet is a leaping action. And here we have a split stance, but we exchange in the air. It's becoming more intense now because we go from a very safe stance to maybe a little bit more unstable. And now we're really chasing instability. The faster we move, the more unstable we are. And ultimately, that's where we want to get, because that's where we receive the most force. And we want to teach the body how to deal with unstable, fast, dynamic movements. So we're exchanging the limb, and that then has us trying to have to solve problems at a faster rate. And then imagine there's a big imaginary line here. We're now moving into 1-foot movement. We have bounding from one leg to the other, and hopping, where we're just using one leg. So left, 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 left. And bounding is left, right, left, right. So if we look at these movements, we have leaps. Traveling forward, it could be on the spot, it could be backwards. Those limbs are fixed. We're landing in a good stacked position, and that is our easiest movement pattern that we can do. The split stance leap. We have a split in that stance, but it's a fixed limb position. Split exchange leap. Like I mentioned, that split is exchanging in the air, and because of that, it spikes that instability. We have to solve that problem quicker of like, wow, there's the ground. I've got to organize my body well. I've got to land those feet at the same time. And it's becoming more intense. Bounding from one leg to the other. Obviously, it's more intense because it's on one leg. So that left leg is dealing with all of the load that you would have received if you were doing it on 2 feet. So it becomes a lot more intense on the body. And then the last pattern is a hopping action. Just using my left leg here. Why is it harder? Because I have to cycle that leg faster. And the faster we move our legs and whip them into the ground, the more intense it becomes. Now, you may have seen a few of those movements and thought, whoa, that looks pretty intense. Would I ever get to hopping? That's where we bring in these four different tiers, I call them. But really, it's just levels of movement. So you can do all five of those movement patterns in a very light form. You could do little baby hops. You could do small bounds from one side to the other. You could do a split exchange. You could do a split stance leap, or as I'm doing here, just a normal leaping pattern. Very easy. It should be rudimentary, have a feeling of complete kind of relaxation, but your number one focus is just to be fast on the ground. Tina reiterated that points of speed. As soon as we take away the speed element and we're slow on the ground, it is much more primarily muscular dominant. We say to the tendon, we don't really need to use you right now. I don't need to pull hard on you. And actually, I don't have enough force from this fall, or I don't want to transition this fall directly back up into the air as quickly, and therefore I don't need that fast recoiling action. So the light twist still has to be fast. It can't be slow on the ground because we still want to affect the tendon. But as I said, we can do it on 2 feet in a split stance and an exchanging stance from one leg to the other, or just on one leg. And that goes the same with every single level as we move up. And you can see this arrow leads us along from light to medium to ping. This one over here is slightly different, and I'll explain why in a second. Now, medium tier is what we might all deem as a sub-maximal form of plyometrics. So if you can imagine yourself, you're going to push it pretty hard, but I'm just going to turn it down enough so that I can still be a little bit more relaxed. Now, what's unique about this system is everyone has their own iteration of what sub-maximal medium tier may look like, because it is self-prescribed. I'm not throwing you off a box here and saying this is sub-maximal or this is maximal. No, what I'm doing is saying to you, give me 75 to 85%. And right here, I'm doing that whilst I'm bounding. I could be doing it on 2 feet. I could be doing it on just a single leg and just hopping. But ultimately, it's about you self-prescribing the intensity. The medium tier is where you're going to do lots and lots of this volume that is truly going to create the adaptations that we want. The ping tier is exactly as we say. You are aiming to ping off the ground with as much intensity as possible and to be as fast on the ground as possible at the same time. It sounds tremendously difficult, and that's because it is. And our goal would be to try to get to here, especially as an older age individual. It might not be that you ever get there. It might be that once a week you do one movement of just 2 foot ping tier leaps for height on the spot. Would you ever get to, this is potentially the most intense plyometric that you can do, a flat hop into a high hop? Maybe not. This is just an example of what that would look like. The ping tier is hugely intense. It is a maximal form of plyometric, and you're going to do very few repetitions here. I might do a set of 5 to 8 repetitions in a set and do maybe 2 to 3 sets. And that's it. That's my ping tier work done. So light movements, sub-maximal movements, and maximal movements. These are the phrases that I use: light, medium, and ping. Call them as you wish. If you want to use the plus pliers tiered system, then be my guest. Now, around these three movements is a wonderful tier called the deep tier. And the deep tier is a supporting tier because it's not plyometric in nature. because of how long I spend on the ground. We're talking 2.5 to 3 times longer on the ground. And that's because of the depth of the landing that I'm getting here. A lot more flexion at the knees, hips. And because of that, I'm spending a lot more time on the ground. It is very muscular driven, but because of the time that you're spending in that movement, because of the depth that you're at, you are getting a lot of benefits for joint health, for tissue, what would we class as kind of extensibility, and taking that tissue through a lot of length and returning it back and getting this real elastic effect to things. And this is really preferable for supporting all of these. So I use these at the end of sessions and it's very therapeutic in a way. I would push, honestly, every human possible on earth to do deep tier. I definitely wouldn't push everyone to do ping tier, but deep tier, medium, and light are where you should be spending 99% of your time. So there's the plus pliers tiered system. You start small, you start on 2 feet, and you eventually want to push the threshold to get to a stage where you're close to around here, and maybe you're doing things on one leg. Where would I fit plyometrics? So the light tier, I would use them for warming up. I'd use them to warm up for running, doing other plyometrics. This stuff is going to lead me into more intense movements. Use it to prepare for lifting. Why not? Why not? Why do the same old boring preparation for getting onto machines, doing barbell movements, kettlebell movements? Why not do a little bit that focuses on bone health? Preparing for kettlebell training and really just about anything. Prepare for the day with light tier plyometrics. Get standing there, bounce around, start to feel good blood flow, allow the tissue to be lengthening, shortening, recoiling, getting that elastic kind of feeling. Very relaxed. It can start a little bit slower, gradually build up in intensity. You can throw them in circuits, and you can put them as a kind of a fancy phrase, but an extensive volume-based session. You might be doing lots of tempo running. You might be doing circuits, as I mentioned, you might be doing heavy volumes of kettlebell movements. Why not use these as a way to get good stimulation plyometrically, but also just as a way to do a bit more activity, but do it in a form of movement that is reactive and bouncy. Medium tier, meat and potatoes. In the UK, we call it bread and butter. Same. Meat and potatoes, this is the bulk of what you should be doing. Contrasting it with other things. Why not? If you're out and let's say that you're doing sprinting, let's say you're running, I don't know, repeat miles around a track, or you're doing some fartlek training, contrast it with some medium tier plyometrics. And honestly, save it for the freshest moment of your week. Maybe you start your training week on a Monday. You've had Sunday off. Monday, I feel good. This is where I do my real great work. Put your medium tier work in there. Ping tier, doing something maximal with maximum intent when it comes to plyometrics once a week. Again, you could contrast that with a lift. Let's say you're squatting. Let's say you're deadlifting. Let's say you're doing something heavy on a machine. You're throwing kettlebells around. Once you've done a few of those repetitions, go straight into a highly intense plyometric. Match it. Let's say you're doing 3 reps on a squat. Go do 3 reps on a ping tier movement. 1, 2, 3. Boom, boom, boom. And there you go. You get this great stimulation of the reactive element with the slow grinding muscular elements of a lift. This again could be slotted into the highest intensity portion of your week. Deep tier. Throw them in warm-ups. Use these to prepare for lifts. It's phenomenal. Joint preparation is amazing with these. What is very different with this is we're not just taking your body through a deep range of motion, we are taking it through a deep range of motion at speed. And everyone is scared to go there. Everyone. We can scale it up to honestly making every world-class athlete on this planet intimidated to do deep range of motion movements at velocity. It doesn't have to look like this. It can be way more rudimentary. It can just be oscillating very small little bounces in the bottom of a movement. But ultimately, it's phenomenal for prepping our joints. Again, contrast it with something. What if you are sprinting and you want to contrast it with some deep tier? What if you're lifting and you're going to contrast it with deep tier? There are many ways in which you can throw this in. And really, there is no right or wrong answer for deep tier movements. And circuits, if you're doing metabolic circuits and you're not doing a deep tier movement, I think you're missing out hugely on that. So I'll kind of just round up everything here. So that's how I will piece together my training with most athletes and using these 4 tiers, light, medium, ping, the deep tier, and having 5 different movement patterns that you can explore within. You might graduate yourself to being able to do all 5 movement patterns in the light tier. That doesn't mean that you need to do all 5 of those movement patterns in the medium. You might only be doing 2 foot movement, and it's going to take you a few months to graduate into bounding and then into hopping. The same can be even starting at the light tier. If you've never done this stuff before and you're struggling, don't feel like you need to progress everything rapidly. Allow training to develop the capacities and the ability to get you into those movement patterns. So if you were to scale it all up, you start here with light tier movements and you graduate a few of these movements into your training. You don't progress, don't go from leaps to split stance and end up at hopping. It all stays in the program. You can do them forward, backwards, side to side, be really creative with it. And ultimately, we want to try to get you doing single leg movement in the medium tier and plenty of bilateral movements in light, medium, and in the deep tier. Okay, that's everything from me. I don't want to keep you too much longer. But Tina, please do carry on the last few bits.
Sure. Let's see. Isabella, do we have, let me see if she put questions in. Oh, wow. We're looking at questions.
Oh wait, I
That
was
is,
just gonna, yeah,
oh, yep.
sorry. The first question posed was very similar to the one you told me about, like the what type of
Yeah.
shoes. And then the second one, and then I just have one more to copy in the chat, and then there's 3 questions for right now.
Okay, great. Wait, let's see. Um, Wait, did you put them in there? Oh, let's talk about, Matt, can you answer that question about shoes? A lot of people always want to know about shoes. And then there was the question
Absolutely.
about, especially if someone has plantar fasciitis.
Okay, absolutely. So I'll start just with shoes in general. I do think that shoes are important, but I don't think that you can worry about it so much that it's a complete barrier to entry that stops you from just doing some good quality work. There's nothing wrong with you choosing a nice surface, even just at home. Let's say you've just got some basic training mats. Go out on some grass somewhere. Barefoot on grass is going to give you a lot more proprioceptive awareness of just feeling safe in space. And I think that if you want to start there, there is no problem in doing so. Where you want to get yourself to is using a shoe that is going to provide you more access to a larger amount of this work. So people will tell me that you should be doing or using barefoot shoes all the time, and you should be strengthening your feet to allow you to, I don't know, improve your capacity to do plyometrics. And I can tell you, the track and field world doesn't do it because they know that if they didn't wear them, they would do half the volume that they do when they're wearing good quality running shoes. And a good quality running shoe, if you held it up and you're to hold the heel cup and hold the front, and if you turn it and you get too much torsion in it, that's probably too soft of a shoe. If I was to flip the base of it and hold the forefoot, and if I can push my thumbs through it, it's probably too soft. I wouldn't have something that has a very heavy heel lift, but I also wouldn't have a completely flat shoe. You still do want some protection of your heel, because ultimately you want to get to a stage where you feel comfortable in slamming your leg into the ground. And that is as blunt as you can be with it. You're looking to be quite aggressive with the floor. And if a pair of shoes holds you back from being aggressive, then you're going to have a ceiling to how much intensity that you're going to produce into the ground. So you have to think of it like this. Let's say that I do a plyometric session barefoot and I can do 100 landings. Great. I did it barefoot and I got an enormous amount of isolated work on my feet. But if I'm wearing good shoes and I can do 250 landings, I have to think about the compounding effect on the rest of my general health. It's going to be better for the muscle, tendon, and bone tissue. It's going to be better for my cognitive awareness and capacity to understand where I am in space, proprioceptively know where to put my foot. And there's just a lot more learning that goes on. So I think you can start your session with light tier movements in bare feet and do that on 2 feet. As soon as you graduate onto 1 foot, put some shoes on. I push everyone towards a good quality pair of Asics trainers or Asics or Mizuno. I think that most Nike and Adidas trainers are pretty terrible. I would never recommend wearing the ON shoes. What are they? On shoes? I don't know what they are. The cloud ones. And I definitely wouldn't push anyone towards oh, what's the brand called? It's just slipped my mind. Anyway, Asics and Mizunos are your best bet, especially if you're really keen to get started with this and you want to do this a couple times a week. It is going to give you access to volume and frequency. And that, in research, is our biggest compounding factor for adaptations, especially when we're looking at tissue.
I'm going to add something, a personal experience from what he just said. So I used to do plyometrics with Nike McInnes, which is a cross trainer, and it has a very hard sole. And I thought, oh, this is probably better. But as soon as I switched to the Asics, I have the gel cumulus. And then I messaged, I'm like, oh my God, I can bounce so much better. So the performance is better. Your body feels much more capable in those shoes versus a hard Nike Metcon shoe.
Absolutely.
Uh, oh, that's the other question I remember that's often is the idea of how much. So how often, how long to, to do plyometrics so that it has impactful results. I'm going to leave that with you, Matt.
So obviously it very much depends on how you're spreading your plyometrics throughout the week. Honestly, if you're going to do it, personally for me, I think that you set aside 2 days a week where you do the whole thing. You're going to go through each of the tiers. You're maybe going to do a bit of a warm up where you add skips and a few drills. Maybe you're doing a little bit of mobility, but I would do some light tier movements. And if you can, get into some medium tier movements and then finish the session with some deep tier movements. Obviously, if you're not at the medium tier component, you're going to do light tier and you're going to do deep tier. And I would choose 2 days a week that you're going to do that. And your job over a year is to increase the frequency to 3 times. And then I think you're kind of done. Your job then is to increase how much work you're doing in it or how much intensity you're doing in it. So you could split your week up. I have an intensity day and I have a voluminous day. It might be that the first day of the week is intensity and I'm trying to push myself into more intense realms. Maybe I challenge myself to move to a split stance or a split exchange. And I'm hoping to graduate myself into bigger and more intense tiers. The other session can be, you know what? This is a big bulk of 2 foot work where I'm exploring different directions. Now, volume is very relatable to fatigue. So if those movements, and honestly, start with an arbitrary number. You're going to do, let's say, 5 different movements here with slight different nuances, and you may do 2 sets of 10 to 15 reps. You get to movement 3, and everything sounds thud, thud. I've lost this ability to bounce. Done. Move away from the reactive stuff, bring in the deep tier stuff. And again, it's about learning really where you are at in that moment, especially if you're starting out. The deep tier stuff as well, it's just going to become so muscularly fatiguing. Your body's going to say, I am done. And that's fine. You're always going to win when you think, I'm going to try and live to fight another day. I'm not using plyometrics as a way to annihilate. I'm just trying to stimulate. Okay. And we're stimulating our system to walk away and feel good. We want to feel like we still have a little bit of a pop in our step. So it's really hard to give a certain volume. So pick 3 to 5 movements in light and medium. If you're not at medium, you just stay with light. And I would say 2 to 4 movements in the deep tier. And I would play with 10 or 8 to 12 or 15 reps. If you're new to it, start lower and gradually week on week add 2 reps. Couple of sets of each one. The first few weeks is all about exploration. Oh, I can do this on the spot. Can I move forward? What if I went sideways? What if I actually tested backwards? And it's just this compounding thing where I'm trying to build up and I'll go, oh, okay, I'm learning that that movement is really intense for me because the next day I'm like, oh, yep, my Achilles feels a little fatigued and tired today. And that's fine. This is all a learning scenario. And I can say to you, this is exactly the way that I will coach the top of top athletes. If I'm working with NFL pros or Olympians, I still have to throw things at the wall and just see what sticks and what works for that individual. It's just how it works with dynamic movement. It's very different to crude barbell training, or, I can just put a pin in a different weight and say, cool, this works for me. Everyone has their own intensities that they deal with. We just don't get that much feedback from that. So use your ears, your eyes, and just feeling and sensations of saying, I'm done. And often less is more in these situations.
Great. I think that is all the questions, unless there's any more, Isabel. I think that was it, right? Um,
There's a couple that have come up in the chat.
Yeah, there's the one about are plyometrics safe for women with bulging disc, and then the one I just copied and pasted that said how often, how long is it necessary to do plyometrics to have impactful results?
oh, that's one he just
Yeah.
just answered.
Okay, then it's just the first one I said.
The bulging discs. So I think that, and then Matt, you correct me if I'm wrong. I think we get in our head, or when we hear from MRIs that we have a bulging disc, it depends on like is it painful right now? Because I think the research with PTs shows that people might have bulging discs and also have no symptoms. So Donna, is it because there's pain, or is it you just have a bulging disc?
We may need to open our mic.
Or if Donna's still there, if you can throw it in the chat, no more pain due to PT.
Then I honestly, for someone like yourself, Donna, it's a case of trying movements out. And at the moment, it doesn't have to look plyometric. It can be slow. And there is going to be a big learning effect of moving away from the inhibitions that have built up over time of having bulging disc issues, because it's very related to how your torso is going to brace. Because in a plyometric movement, we want to relax in the air and then brace instantaneously just before we hit the ground throughout the contact, and then it has to release. So if you are tight and just trying to bounce, it's just not going to work for you. So that's why we have that scalable system of start on 2 feet, start very light. And honestly, for you, Donna, it doesn't have to be fast on the ground. It's just testing the water. And over time, you're just to push those boundaries a little bit. And if you get anything that does drive symptoms to rise up, then you take a step back and just say, cool, I need to just maybe put a marker in of how many reps I'm doing, how many sets I'm doing, and then whether I get any sensational pain immediately or the day after I get any kind of pain that then crops up a day later. And then give yourself a score of like, out of 100, what intensity was that? Was it 50%? And if it was, great. Can I notch it up to 60% next week? And it's going to be, it's all about having a system that scales and progresses. And once you have that, you have the ability to make it self-prescribed, and it's all based on how you feel and how much intensity you want to exert in that instantaneous moment. So it doesn't have to look plyometric to start with, but it will get there.
I think that is all our questions. Thank you guys for joining us, me and Matt. Thank you, Isabella, for moderating. I will send this recording out to everyone. And if there's any more questions, please do reply back to my email. Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Have
guys. I really appreciate it.
have a wonderful night.
Have a good one.